University of Iowa announces plans to close Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies Department. How many millions of dollars a year is the university throwing at these ridiculous, stupid, worthless degree programs?
The way that people just throw around public money is mind-boggling.
Renegade Online. You know, there's a lot of conversation out there about DEI and how it's, is it still hanging around? Is it changing? Is it on its way out the door? And there was this story. University of Iowa announces plans to close Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies Department. Basically, the degree programs that you scratch your head and wonder, what commercially viable purpose?
You just killed my gag. I was going to say that's really going to devastate the Iowa gender sector.
Yeah. Joining us here, I knew he'd be coming in about an hour late. Welcome aboard WDW Pro. How you doing?
Hey, happy to be here, man. The internet is a dangerous place in the past few days, but here we still stand.
You know, I saw this, and it was funny. There was a couple of companion stories, and I was going to have this one as well. Was 2024 the year the DEI fell apart? Now, these were two separate stories released the same day on Fox News. I thought that was entertaining. But to start with this story here, Iowa's State Board of Regents recently approved recommendations to scale back DEI initiatives. Now, Ron, we've heard Trump talk about how one of the things he's going to do when he gets in office is all of these, at least federally mandated DEI programs within federal agencies, things that the federal government actually manages. And I think maybe public education will be not too far behind. We've had some Supreme Court rulings on this or something to that effect leading up to this point. And I mean, when you see stuff like this and what Trump wants to do, what do you think from a legal perspective that a lot of this stuff is going to wind up looking like when it happens?
Here we're talking about higher education, which is going to be under the spotlight under Harmeet Dillon as head of the Civil Rights Division, and which my friend and sometimes colleague Bill Jacobson over at the Legal Insurrection Foundation with his project, Equal Protection Project, have been pushing on very hard. State schools and any institution that accepts any kind of federal money, including federal loan money, they can't discriminate. And this DEI stuff is discriminatory. It's discriminatory who's allowed to participate in these programs, who's allowed to get scholarships, who's allowed to be hired for faculty positions. These are targets as broad as barn doors. So it would be very, very prudent for at least these slow-moving public education institutions to not make themselves targets for the Justice Department, which has historically never actually enforced any kind of withdrawing of federal funds or taken any adverse action other than threatening to. In other words, they have ended programs like this on a sort of a slow track, telling institutions, hey, we got a complaint. You guys must realize this isn't legal. If it ever was, it certainly isn't now. There's usually forgiveness over that. I think that era of forgiveness is going to go away. And it also, frankly, it gives these institutions and these legislatures an excuse to save some money on stuff that really doesn't deliver for them. I mean, in Iowa, how much pressure is there in Iowa for this?
Having this conversation last night, I think in part on our member stream, and one of the things I brought up, talking about, what has happened to where the cost of higher education has just gone through the roof the way it has. And why does it cost so much for all this stuff? And well, what you effectively have nowadays, it's basically a single payer system. The federal government is in charge of the student loan industry. It is the federal government now. Everybody out there is told, they have to go to college. And number two, they're given pretty easy access to capital to pay whatever the cost might be, even if they're going to get a gender studies degree, which has really no economic value when you leave college.
It's a giveaway to the financial sector.
That's it.
The government is saying make a bunch of loans at a market rate of interest to people who you otherwise would not underwrite because of the risk.
Exactly.
They will default. That's okay. We'll be paying those back.
And we've never had that happen before. Oh, wait, 2008. It's the same story. And I've told people this for years, that what happened in 2008 was because the government set the system up for that to happen. They told the banks they had to do it. Don't worry. We've got Franklin Raines over there at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac buying them up. By the way, we've incentivized, this was during the 90s, the CEO of the Federal Home Loan Corporations and stuff like this. We've incentivized him financially that the more of these high-risk, toxic loans that he buys up from the banks, the more money he gets paid. But don't worry, then we turned around and we built him into all these mortgage-backed securities, and we had AIG underwrite it. Y'all know the story, but it was all Wall Street's fault.
And by the way, I mean, just only nominally related. The whole thing, too, with Donald Trump, the crimes of Donald Trump on his real estate loans, banks purposely make loans to people that might not satisfy their underwriting requirements because that's how they make money.
Right.
There's there's a degree of risk that they're not necessarily willing to acknowledge to shareholders and regulators, but which it makes perfect commercial sense to them. I'm not even saying that happened there. I don't think it did. Mm-hmm. But it is very well known that the bank officers who make lending choices get compensated. They get bonuses.
Sure.
For making very large loan to very substantial real estate and other developers and other businesses. There's a certain amount of risk that comes with that, but there's a general proposition. Everyone is in on it. Yep. That's at least relatively victimless. Here, the victim is the taxpayer.
That's just it. But here's the other thing, though, too.
And the students who borrow the money and become indebted with a debt that is virtually impossible to discharge in bankruptcy.
One of the things, though, that's the difference that you just mentioned, and I think it was a great comparison. People talk about the stuff with Trump, right? Risk is always priced, right? There's always risk with any loan in this case. But that's where the interest rate they charge comes into play. That's how risk gets priced. Hey, if we think you're really low risk and the loan is secured by, say, a piece of real property, a tangible asset. So, for example, if you're Donald Trump and you want to borrow $2 billion to buy a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan or something like that, or billions of dollars to do that, well, for the bank, the risk is, can they manage it? Can they run it? Can they pay the note? And if they default, hey, we've got a $2 billion piece of property in downtown Manhattan. We're not out, right? That's number one. So risk is always priced accordingly. Number two, on the flip side, and this is the problem, getting back to this story here, how this all ties together, is that when you make a student loan, there is nothing backing this. It's a credit card. The bank, if you default on it, if you go out and get a worthless degree, like some of the ones listed in this title that serve no economic purpose. In fact, the whole DEI industry, and that's how this ties together, the DEI industry was invented for people that get these stupid degrees to go get jobs that serve effectively no purpose other than to become a money pit for the Fortune 500 to dump it into. To score ESG points.
They're pretty good at inserting Marxism into the economy.
Well, that's it. That's again no beneficial financial purpose to that. But the point is that it's an unsecured loan, right? And that's the difference.
It also is what has driven the utterly preposterous increase in the cost of higher education, both public and private.
Exactly. That's the other side of it. The free and easy access to capital to fund this stuff. This is why these universities, these colleges can continue to just raise their rates, their tuition, or now they call it fees. Like, the state of Louisiana, for example, passed a law years ago that colleges can't raise their tuition anymore more than a certain amount per year to try to stem the tide of rising inflation costs. So what did and these are public universities. So what did they do? Oh, it's not tuition, So your tuition's still only $2,000 a year, but now we're raising your fees by $2,000 or $3,000 more a year. So this is how they get around it. They all use the syntax to jive the system.
So let me give you guys some statistics because I think that the universities have not been in as bad a position as they are now in perhaps 100 years. From 2019 until today, according to bestcolleges.com, there has been an enrollment decrease for undergraduates by approximately 6%. That's a pretty significant loss, but it's even steeper if you look at the community colleges. So if you drop down below the states and the Ivy Leagues and all of that, and you get down there to the smaller places, 37% decrease in attendance from 2010 to 2023. And what that means to me, what it suggests to me is that the insertion of propaganda and the DEI-ification of higher learning has inserted that additional risk in there that you've been talking about. People are looking at this and saying now to themselves, the cost associated with this is not returning to me a service of making me smarter. It's an attempt to indoctrinate me and my children. I have to sit here with a wacko who I would not let serve me fries, but somehow has managed to surprise us all by being a professor. And I think that the general public is now saying, you know what, I'll go to the internet. And I understand that there are some universities that the purpose, or at least a huge part of the purpose of going there, is to network and to gain access to incredibly wealthy, intelligent, and well-connected people. But at the community college level, you're literally going there to get the information you need to be able to do a job. So when we see a 37% drop in slightly over a decade at the community college level, that really is indicating that people are turning against this and saying, I'll just get it off the internet. I'll be fine. I don't need the craziness.
Yeah, or they're figuring out that, not everybody needs a 4-year degree, or not everybody should get a 4-year degree. Look, especially down here along the Gulf Coast, when you can work in the oil and gas industry, they train you to do it. Yeah, it's tough manual labor, but the guys out there, the reason why they get paid so well is because it's tough. You can go get out of there making 6 figures, okay? And you don't have any student debt. And the company that you're working for is training you how to do it. Same thing with shipping down here, commercial shipping, maritime shipping, stuff like that. Very, very lucrative. There's lots of good jobs out there. But I want to get back to this article real quick, just to cover some of the actual information in it, since we had that discussion. So this is, again, the University of Iowa closing gender studies, women's studies, sexuality studies as a part of pulling back on DEI. Iowa announced that it would close the gender, women's, sexuality studies in public universities in the state to continue to respond to a changing DEI landscape. Quote, under the proposed plan, the college would close the departments of American Studies and Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies, as well as the current majors in American Studies and in Social Justice. Yes, you can go to college and get a degree on Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, basically is what that one boils down to. It's a degree in Marxist agitation, which have fewer than 60 students combined. Gender studies, sexuality studies, social justice studies, American studies, which is, I don't believe probably what the title of that is. It's not what you think it is, I'm sure. 60 students. And when you look at this, you have how many millions of dollars a year is the university throwing at these ridiculous, stupid, worthless degree programs, and they're probably losing money on them. This is, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. And it's, again, having DEI initiatives in terms of admissions for colleges is one thing, right? That's what Ron talked about before. That's problematic when it comes to the law. But having the degree programs, it's not illegal, but having the degree programs are just basically, it's just burning money. It's going nowhere. They're trying to score points by having them, but they're realizing that this is absolutely stupid and we don't need to have it. Now, you're still going to have these kind of degree programs probably all over the University of California system and places like that. Those aren't going to go away. But across middle America like this, what's the demand? It's like Ron said, what's the demand in Iowa or Nebraska for these programs?
So what I've learned is that the world of the universities, the state universities, is kind of a borderless world. Because academia, to a large extent, they're only talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one in the even where there are fields, and this includes law, that correspond to what is being done in the academic research and theory worlds, there's no connection.
Yeah.
Lawyers are not reading law reviews anymore. Law professors are talking to law professors, and feminism professors are talking to feminism professors, and it's the same thing. If you want to be respected by your fellow university presidents, the kind of money these people make.
Oh, the professors? Oh, it's outrageous in some cases.
And the presidents of colleges and universities, city university chancellor makes like $600,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way that people just throw around public money is mind-boggling.